Hi guys, and welcome to our today's webinar devoted to teaching reading skills. Let me start sharing my screen with you, right? First and foremost, I'd like to introduce myself. So my name is Marina. I'm both a corporate teacher and an expert in our TDC department. I've been working as an English teacher for almost 9 years, and I have just vast experience, right, in translating sphere. And to tell you the truth, my students are totally different, and some of them might ask for some kind of translation. But how to avoid reading every single word, how to avoid translation so as not to get bogged down in this routine, and to get the main idea of the text or to get some more details instead of just reading. Okay, as for our today's agenda, so first and foremost, we'll briefly put ourselves in our students' shoes. We'll try to experience what it feels like when you don't understand much, but you have to do something with the text. Afterwards, we're going to proceed with a number of different skills, such as predicting, skimming, scanning, and of course, inferencing. We're going to see how to boost our students' skills in terms of reading, and consequently, I do believe that your students' reading skills will be developed quite well. Okay, so imagine that you are like my online students, and that is our regular class. I'm showing one picture to you, and there are some questions to answer. So let's go. So my dear students, look at this picture. What is going on? Who is this girl? What is she doing, I wonder? That is a tricky question, even for our students, right? And your answers might be totally different. For instance, she might be a football fan. Probably, yeah, quite possible. Or she might participate, she might take part in some kind of protest or probably a meeting. Quite possible. But again, quite possible, right? So look, I've just wiped out some words, right? And we might have different predictions. But as you can see, there are some kind of clues or hints that might be handy. For instance, this symbol, right? It might refer to like some feminist protest, or her facial expression. She's not so cheerful, and probably she's not a football fan. Okay, let it be that just she's participating, right, in a kind of, I would say, protests. So let's try to see if your predictions are fully right, or partially right, or maybe fully wrong. Actually, I would say that my suggestion was quite right, I would say, or partially right, but we are talking about equal pay, right? Equal pay. She's not so cheerful, and she's holding this kind of poster, right? She might be protesting, and so on and so forth. Okay, quite good. But now let us put briefly in our student shoes. Let's experience, let's try to feel what it feels like when we are given a text, but not in English, maybe in Portuguese. So does anyone speak Portuguese by any chance? I hope no. So first and foremost, let us take a look at the title of this article. What does it refer to? What is the topic of this article? What could it be about? It might be a tricky question, right? What could it be about? But still, there are some international words. For example, combate or salarial or diferença, yeah, mujeres, and so on and so forth. And you might just guess that probably we're talking about some protests that are taking place in Iceland so far, right? And we are talking about just equal pay regardless of gender, right? And where is the text from, I wonder? So as you can see, so this like text is taken from BBC, right? And of course, we might expect some statistics or some measurable data, right? If we open a BBC article, or for example, some author statements, right? Some conclusions, or some kind of introductory phase, and so on and so forth. So we've already somehow prepared for this forthcoming article, right? And now let's dig deeper, I would say. So here you can see a set of different questions. All these questions are about either names or figures. And it's time to find relevant information in this text. Don't worry, I'm going to guide you a bit. So the first question is, who is Pat Milligan? So the information is given in the first paragraph. Let's have a look. Let's search for this word, Pat Milligan. Okay, Pat Milligan is a leader of one organization, right? Let's have a look at this sentence. There are some international words like leader, global, consultoria, something that might seem to be similar or familiar to you. Okay, so what about the second question, who is Daphne Romney? The information is given in this paragraph. Okay, Daphne Romney. Let me think. Okay, Daphne Romney, as far as I can judge, she's a kind of lawyer, right? That specializes in equal pay litigation. Perfect, good guess. So, what about the average pay gap in the world? So, guys, what do you think? So, what is the average pay gap in the world? How big is the average pay gap? And we are inclined to believe that this average pay gap is 32%. Quite right. Yeah, because there is only like one figure here, 32%. That's perfect. When was equal pay law established in the United Kingdom? Again, we are searching for some like kind of years, right? Like when was equal pay law established? And you might be in two minds. You might have some doubts. For example, this one or this one. But we're talking about the United Kingdom, and that is a clue, right? And you might be just stricken with this information, Reina Unida, and that is fully correct, right? So the law was established in 1917. But now, let us come up with a few conclusions. Let us jump forward to our conclusions. So based on what you have just grasped, right? What do you think? If all British employees are paid equally regardless of their gender, or the situation is not so perfect as it seems to be? Let me think. I wonder. So I think that the situation is not so perfect as it seems to be, because otherwise this lady, right? She didn't work, I would say, as a lawyer in this sphere. And if somebody has like kind of a job, if this job is still in demand, probably the situation is not so perfect, right? And otherwise, so this article really didn't exist. So that means that all British employees are not paid equally regardless of their gender. But what helped us to answer here, actually, right? What just really made us understand what's going on in this text. Now we are going to move on to different skills that are going to be boosted for the sake of reading. The first skill that we are going to discuss is called predicting. Actually, it's of primary importance to boost predicting skills because prediction is an educated guess that can be confirmed or denied while reading. So if I ask you to take a look at this poster, right? And for example, the question might be, if it is worth watching or not. What can you say about this film without looking through this review? Just simply taking a look at this poster. Your predictions might be the following. That is probably a good film just because of a legendary star, Brad Pitt. Just Brad Pitt starred in this film, right? Or the second one, this film is going to be quite suspicious because probably I can see that there is a gloomy scene here, right? Or, as far as I can judge, this film is about space. It's like a sci-fi movie just because the main character is wearing a spacesuit. Quite possible. And those predictions are called educated guesses, not random guesses. Because if I, for example, ask you, like, if this main hero or this character is married or not, or if this main character is vegetarian or not, those would be random guesses because it's not so obvious from this poster. But the main idea is to provide you students with some questions that might cause your educated guesses. Okay, let's practice. So probably you might have remembered this text about this woman, right? Heidi Marie, right? Who had to survive and who had to live without money. And of course, we would have to ask just a few questions at the pre-reading stage to provoke some interest, to generate this interest, provoke some kind of discussion. But my question is the following. What questions can we ask at this pre-reading stage? Let's think. It's not so easy thing to do, really, to ask these questions. But what kind of questions would you ask if you were in this teacher's shoes? Okay, let's see. Why do you think she did it? That is quite a simple question, but it might raise some concerns, and actually our students, so you might be flooded with lots of answers from your student side. Here, just because of, I don't know, because she was alone and she didn't know what to do, or because she wanted to challenge herself, something like that. And the second question, how do you think she survived? Probably, for example, she set up something, or probably, I don't know, like she helped other people, right, in exchange for some services, something like that. Okay. Why? Why is it so important to make predictions at this pre-reading stage before reading the text? So I'll tell you that there are, I would say, a number of reasons why is it so vital, or why is it so essential to make these predictions. First and foremost, we might activate background knowledge of our students because they might have seen these particular pictures, like with this girl or with this lady somewhere in the streets of their cities, right? And they might brainstorm some ideas what the text is going to be about. Or this stage might help us to be prepared for lexis, for information structure. We might anticipate if it is like, for example, a scientific article, or it's a kind of, I don't know, like fiction, something like that. Okay, of course it helps to be prepared for structure and information. We might anticipate if there is a like conclusion or introduction, so on and so forth. Okay, we've just got some information about predicting skills. We have to make predictions at the pre-reading stage. But what about reading itself? Actually, the question is the following. How can we confirm or deny these predictions? Imagine that our students have just made some predictions, right? They have just answered these two questions. Why do you think she did it? And how do you think she survived? But then, while reading this text, our students will have to either confirm or probably deny these predictions. So, but how? Do we need to read every single word? Do we have to translate every single word to deny or confirm these predictions? What do you think? Also, that is a controversial question, right? But in this particular case, if you really need to confirm or deny predictions only, we would have to resort to such skill as skimming. What is skimming? You might, ask me. And I would answer. Skimming is a kind of rapid reading when our students would have to read a text quite rapidly, right? For the sake of getting the gist or the main idea of the text, right? Now, for instance, let's have a look at this review, right? So this review is called, I would say the title of this review is What a Waste, right? And I'm going to ask you, dear students, let's look through this text, right? Quite rapidly. And the main idea is to get the gist. What do you think? If this film is worth watching or not? And first and foremost, you might pay your attention to the title itself, right? What a waste. Probably it's not worth watching, right? Because of this title. And also it's like a one-star film. But then you might just look through this text very, very briefly, right? Line by line. And you might find some kind of keywords here, right? For example, ended abruptly. There was nothing special about it. We're so disappointed, and so on and so forth, right? And you might draw your own conclusions that this film is not worth watching. But again, our main goal is to avoid reading. You don't have to read every single word and understand every single word for that. And that is a kind of practical skill, because we also might, I would say, our text in real life also might be skimmed, right? Instead of just translating every single word, we might look through the text briefly and draw some conclusions based on this text. But the question is how to teach skimming. What should the skimming task be like? Should we set time limit? What about the number of questions? How to, I would say, display or present this skill to our students? How to persuade our students that there are some other options rather than to read every single word and understand every single word? And now I'm going to teach you, or to show you, to persuade you how to present this kind of technique, right? How to explain this technique to our students. So first and foremost, our students would have to read the title, because usually there our students might find some relevant information, right? Afterwards, our students would have to focus on the introductory paragraph, because actually the main idea or the gist of the text might be contained there. Of course, we shouldn't neglect just the following stage, I would say, or step. Our students will have to read the first and the last sentence of every paragraph, right? Look at some pictures of graphs or probably charts if there are some visual aids, they might be quite handy. Or pay attention to italics or words in bold, just because whatever attracts our attention might be quite meaningful, whatever stands out, right? I would say from the crowd. And of course, read the conclusion, if there is any conclusion here. As for time limit, of course, it should be short enough, because otherwise, for example, if I tell you I'm giving you 5 minutes or I'm giving you 3 minutes, that means subconsciously, that means that our students probably they would start reading every single word and translating every single word, but our main idea is to avoid it, right? That's why set time limit. As for a number of questions, I would say, of course, it's up to you, but still, we are recommended to ask up to 3 questions here, because the main idea is to get the gist of this text. And only afterwards, you might ask ICQs. So to say, there is a kind of, there is abbreviation, right? That stands for instruction checking questions. If you are constantly working with low-level students, it goes without saying, right? Undoubtedly, they might ask you some more questions about the activity itself. So as to avoid all these questions, you might ask instruction checking questions before the task. For example, how many questions should you answer? How long will it take you to answer? And there is one more, final question. Do you need to read every word for that? explain that it even doesn't work in Russian. We don't have to read every single word to get the gist of this text. Okay, the instruction might look like this. Of course, it's not like a perfect one, but still, you have to pay your attention to some, I would say, aspects. Look through the text in 1 minute, time limit, right? You have to set time limit and answer these questions. Why did she do it? And how did she survive? And our students would have to search for this information, quite general information, I would say, by means of looking through this text very, very rapidly, right? And find the answers to these questions. Okay, now it's time to proceed with the third skill. You might have remembered the text given in Portuguese. Really, a few minutes ago, I was asking some questions regarding this text. Who is Pete Milligan? Who is Daphne Romney? And so on and so forth. So what helped us answer here that, for example, Pat Milligan is a leader of organization or Daphne Romney is a lawyer? So did we have to read every word? How were our eyes moving from top to bottom, from bottom to top, maybe from left to right or vice versa? Of course, you might answer that our eyes were moving, for example, from top to bottom or from bottom to top, and we didn't have to read every single word. But why? Because we had to search for some specific information, either names or probably dates and so on and so forth, right? Like here, Pat Milligan, 32%, 1970, Daphne Romney, and so on and so forth. And this skill is called scanning because we have to scan the text for the sake of searching for some specific, I would say, words, some specific information. And also scanning has a practical application. It's quite practical because if you have, for example, like if you have auditors or lawyers or students who specialize in, I don't know, like accounting, they might not need the rest of the information, but they might need to find some, for example, I don't know, some specific figures. And in this particular case, scanning might be quite helpful. Here, the students would have to ignore everything else that might distract their attention and instead search for specific information. And the question is, how to teach scanning? What should the scanning task be like? What about time limit? Should it be shorter in comparison with skimming? What about a number of questions? Again, should we ask the following question, like my mantra question, do we need to read every single word? What to do with this skill? Okay, no worries. I'll just present this technique as well, right? And as for this particular technique, first and foremost, we would have to avoid reading itself, right? You would have to suggest different patterns. You would have to try different patterns with your student. Probably you might have seen this particular pattern if you prepare your students for international exams. I'm pretty sure that you've just seen this or you've come across this pattern. And here you would have to think how to find the words very, very quickly. For instance, your students might search for specific words using different zigzags or from left to right, from top to bottom, vice versa, and so on and so forth. As for time limit, it should be also quite short, even shorter in comparison with the skimming. Your questions should be not so sophisticated. The answers should be easy to find. For example, a question should contain like either names and numbers, probably dates, and also don't forget to ask ICQs to be sure that your student is not, for example, for example, if you want to be sure that your student just have understood you clearly, right? And your student is not, I would say, is doing the right thing. Okay, here you can see just quite a simple instruction, but if you want to really to present this technique to a student, I would say that it might work perfectly well. For instance, look through the text in 15 minutes Here, of course, it's up to you. You might even add 15 seconds more, like 30 seconds, and answer the questions. What city was she from? Or how old was she when she started the experiment? So these questions are quite simple, quite plain, and the answers are quite easy to find. For example, 54, or she was a German woman, and so on and so forth. And again, you might ask your student, do you need to read every single rate for that or not? Again, explain that it has a practical application. Okay, and now finally, we are approaching inferencing. If you're willing to wrap up your discussion successfully, I'm talking about high-level students, there is one more step, and that is called inferencing. To tell you the truth, it is like reading between the lines. When there is some textual evidence in the text, but our students would have to add their own conclusions too. Let's have a look. Making conclusions based on evidence and reasoning, right? And that is our inference. For instance, imagine that I'm, for example, an HR specialist, yeah, quite a qualified HR specialist, and no one is going to, for example, to hand in a resume or like a CV here with such kind of description that I'm the worst candidate, please don't invite me to this interview. Nobody. But as far as you are like a professional, right, in this sphere, you might have noticed that there is a lack of, for example, knowledge, a lack of skills, right, if we're talking about this particular candidate. And that is called reading between the lines. Again, how to teach this like skill, right? What kind of questions should we ask to be sure that our students are able to read between the lines? What should an interesting task be like, and so on and so forth? What about instructions? So let's just proceed with the practical part. First and foremost, I do hope that you still remember this text about Heidi Marie, yeah, who had to live without money. And I'm going to ask you a few questions about this text, right? Those questions are called inferential questions, where like answers are not explicitly stated in the text, but are reasonably supported by textual evidence. My first question is the following. Did you have many friends? First and foremost, we would have to search for some information, some textual information in this text. Let's go. Let's come back. So did she have many friends? Okay, the first thing that we might notice that she gave her job as a psychotherapist, right? Then she set up a swapping circle, right? She house sat, she stayed in the house in return for watering the plants and so on and so forth. Then she stayed in a student residence. And again, you might have guessed that probably she had many friends just because, first and foremost, if she, for example, if she was a shy person, probably she wouldn't have so many friends. But here we see that she set up a swapping circle, right? She just stayed in a student's residence. It was practically impossible not to be like positive and so on and so forth. And probably she had many friends. That is called reading between the lines. Okay, one more question. Was she shy or outgoing? Again, if she were an introverted person rather than an extroverted person, it would be a disastrous situation to interact with strangers. So that is why I might make some conclusions that probably she was an outgoing person because she set up this swapping circle, right? And so on and so forth. One more question. Was she married when she started her experiment? And that is like a confusing question, I would say, or you might be perplexed. Do you remember if there is some textual evidence in the text about her status, if she was married or not? I don't remember. Probably, as far as I can judge, that there is no textual information about textual evidence about her status, I mean marital status, right? And we might assume that if she had been married, her husband would have reacted to her strange behavior somehow. Her husband would have joined her swapping circle or would have rejected her idea. That is called, again, inferencing. We have to search for some textual evidence, but there is no textual evidence here. There is none, except for that she set up this swapping circle, then also she traveled a lot, so on. And then we would have to add our own conclusions that probably, no, she wasn't married, something like that. And of course, just to summarize briefly, I would say that we've just covered some skills. So let's recap. So the first thing that we've covered is called predicting, right? We're talking about predicting skills. That is quite important to make predictions at the pre-reading stage to generate some interest and to prepare our students for this forthcoming text, right? Our students would have to be prepared for lexis, structure, and so on. And we would have to activate background knowledge. Afterwards, we would have to present two techniques, either skimming or scanning. It depends on our role needs. If our main goal, short-term goal, is to get the main gist of the text, then we would have to resort to skimming. And if our aim is to search for some specific information, some specific ideas, then it should be scanning. And finally, if you really want to wrap up your discussion quite successfully, you would have to extract some more information about this text. Our students would have to answer a few inferential questions of mine, right? Like these questions should be not so obvious, but they should be some textual evidence. And of course, it is designed for, I would say, high-level students, but you might show that there is such an option even if you're working with low-level students. And finally, I'm going to provide you with a few tools that might somehow vary our routine and to add, I would say, to add some more positive moments. Right? First and foremost, if you don't know what to do with this with a student, and your student might have some, I don't know, specific demand, right? So to say demand, sorry, you might, for example, you might resort to our first tool called News and Levels. Here, all these, I would say, articles are distributed in accordance with our students' levels, right? There is one more website, Breaking News English. It's similar to News and Levels, right? All these, I would say, articles are here divided into different groups in accordance again with levels. And one more fantastic tool that also might be handy called Free Newspaper Generator. By means of this tool, you might create your own newspaper from scratch. First of all, you would have to search for one article that might be relevant in terms of your students' needs, right? And just insert all the details, right? And download this article. And finally, right, by trial and error, so your newspaper will be ready. Here, written, for example, by you. Okay, finally, let's summarize. First and foremost, you should remember that some people can transfer reading skills from L1 easily. So-called, they are like smart Alex, right? And they might process information, they might skip irrelevant information, they might search for necessary words quite briefly or quickly, whereas others need help. And instead of just reading every single word and translating every single word, you would have to convince your student that there are so many options, like skimming, scanning, right, for that, and some other options. And of course, we will have to encourage predicting skills so as to facilitate work, right, so as to make it easier to process text. And of course, do not forget about inferencing skills to extract some more details to make reading easier. So thank you so much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to seeing you, right, if we're talking about like a practical part of this webinar, right? Bye-bye. Have a nice day.